Hey folks, and welcome to iWizard. So today I'm going to be talking about the military sci-fi classic, Starship Troopers. This is by Robert A. Heinlein, a very controversial classic indeed, and I do have mixed thoughts on it, so let's get into it. All right, welcome back. Jordan here. So, just one of the all-time greats, Robert A. Heinlein, author, of course, of The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Stranger in a Strange Land, Have Spacesuit Will Travel, the Heinlein Juvenile series. Heinlein was one of those authors that managed to find success in the golden age of sci-fi, but also during the new wave era as well. So just a bit of a synopsis of Starship Troopers before I get into what I liked and what I didn't like, and then the big idea segment. Starship Troopers is set in a future when humans live under an interstellar government called the Terran Federation, which is like a military-run limited democracy, I would call it. Told in the first person, the narrative follows our protagonist, high schooler Juan Johnny Rico, as he signs up for the service in the mobile infantry with his best friend Carl, very much against the wishes of his father. And then we get to follow Rico's journey as he progresses from recruit to officer during a long interstellar war between humans and an alien species known as arachnids, or bugs as they call them. Rico mostly signs up because his crush, the beautiful and intelligent Carmen, is also enlisting. When he gets to Camp Curry for basic, he undergoes intense training under Sergeant Zim, and we get to see simulated nuclear weapons, fights in armored suits, camaraderie, and the standard military discipline and philosophy lectures that you'll get in Heinlein's novels. By the time Rico graduates, the conflict with the bugs has gone from minor incidents to a full-scale war, known appropriately as the Bug War. We then get to see Rico fight with his platoon, Ratchak's Roughnecks, as they carry out raids against a planetary colony held by the Skinnies, who are, at this point, allies of the bugs. Later on, the war comes home as an arachnid attack annihilates the city of Buenos Aires, and Rico must face his toughest challenge yet, the death of one of the people he loves the most. He must also rejoin the fight in the Battle of Klendathu, where the humans have planned an attack on the arachnids' homeworld. All of this with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. As Rico progresses in rank and the military learns more about these bugs, the war becomes a matter of capturing members of the arachnid brain castes and attempting to get at the queens. The stakes couldn't be higher in this coming-of-age military adventure novel that examines age-old questions about political philosophy, capital punishment, militarism, the purpose of war, citizenship, decadence, freedom, and much, much more. All right, so just a little synopsis there. Let's get into what I liked about this book and what I didn't, and then we'll get to the big idea. And in that segment, I'm going to explore the whole controversy of Starship Troopers, because this is one of those rare books that is not really controversial because of the story or characters per se, but I think because of the setting and structure and world building and the sort of background politics of the world. So, all right, what I liked. So I really appreciated and enjoyed the kind of old-fashioned concision that you see here in this book. As you can see, it's kind of a slim volume. Heinlein really exemplifies that quality that makes Golden Age sci-fi so great. Just the way in which you're told exactly as much as you need to know in terms of the characters and the battles and the setting and the science. There's just an economy of style that you see in many of the best writers of this age, from the pulp writers to the noir writers and the minimalists. You see this in sci-fi writers like Kurt Vonnegut and Ursula Le Guin and Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, or even Ray Bradbury. Bradbury, man, that guy could write a 5-page short story like Last Night of the World, and you just feel like you read a full novel. So much happens, and they spin these stories off like it's nothing, and that's what Heinlein's able to do. He just immerses you in the world, gives you a few details about each character, gives you just these little sparse descriptions, and just weaves everything together in the most satisfying of ways. The main character is dropping onto a planet, right, in his space marine power suit. He hits the ground. You can hear the comms coming through his helmet. You get to see what he sees. You get some of his inner reflections. Everyone's talking in this sort of authentic military slang. So there's just a very gritty and concise and almost elegant realism. And by the way, this style that I'm talking about is a big part of what they call the Campbellian Revolution. John W. Campbell was Heinlein's editor for a time at Astounding Magazine. And his motto was, if I remember right, make the marvelous seem mundane and the mundane will seem marvelous. Someone like Philip K. Dick was good at this too. So, the main character will wake up with a massive hangover. He takes his stimmies or whatever, and then he gets under the cleansing ray for his shower, and then he puts on his virtual reality goggles and clocks in for work. And so it's just this way of writing sci-fi where you drop readers into the daily life of the protagonist in whatever futuristic world it is, and you just act like it's normal. But of course, it's marvelous to readers who have to scramble to adapt to this new future. Heinlein's very good at this in almost all of his books. You see that too in The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Another thing I liked in this book is the classroom scenes and the military training that the characters have to go through. I do love fantasy and sci-fi novels that involve sending the main character to a school where everything is new and confusing, and where the masters, or in this case, the sergeants and generals, are enigmatic and strict. You can definitely tell that this book was a major inspiration for works that would follow, like Ender's Game and Joe Haldeman's Forever War, which is actually kind of a reaction to Starship Troopers. I also enjoyed the voice of the main character, Johnny, the letters he receives in basic training from his mother, Mr. Dubois, his inner reflections. It was just, he's a great character, very well written, especially for this age of science fiction. Rico is not the sort of golden age competent man that Heinlein is known for writing about. He's actually kind of just a normal, somewhat thoughtful kid. In some ways, he enters military service because his best friend is doing it. And he wants to impress this girl too, which is very realistic and exactly what young people often do. I liked that this character, Johnny Rico, is flawed. He's thinking of quitting the military because he's frustrated, especially when he doesn't understand why he's doing what he's doing or whether or not it's worth it. He's often filled with fear. So a good main character here. Another thing that I thought was really cool about this book was the Space Marine military infantry suits with the powered armor. That stuff was so cool. They're like smart suits that work with your body and give you feedback and use pressure sensors and negative feedback. The suits kind of do what your body tells it to do. It's got weapons and jets on it, and they use them so that they can actually drop you into a battlefield from orbit. And then during battle, you can jump over houses with it. You've got a mic in your throat. You can bite down on it to give the suit certain commands. It does make me wonder if Starship Troopers inspired Iron Man, which came a little bit after that, but I'm not a big comics nerd, so I have no idea whether that's true. And lastly, I'll just mention that there are all sorts of lessons and ideas in here too that are really fascinating, whether it's political philosophy or economics or military strategy or whatever. There's just a level of thoughtfulness in here that you don't often see in sort of pulpy military sci-fi novels. For example, I loved the lesson at the end of chapter 5 about Marxism and why the labor theory of value is wrong. You get a mini lesson on subjective value theory, which is like an Austrian economics concept. So there's actually a lot of deep stuff in here, and I thought that that's something that makes this novel unique. All right, what I didn't like, let's get into that. Okay, so Starship Troopers is, in some sense, not only a novel, but kind of an extended political essay. A good chunk of this book takes place in these military school classrooms with Rico and other characters engaged in debates with their history and moral philosophy teachers. And you get a sort of long-winded philosophical and these political lectures by the generals and lieutenants in the book. You get some of that too in the letters exchanged between the main character and other people. So yeah, similar to a book like Atlas Shrugged, there's something like a Socratic dialogue going on the whole time. And at times that can be really interesting and well done, and at other times it can feel heavy-handed and overly didactic, as many others have said. I'd also say, going along with that, that there's really no story here, and I'm not even exaggerating. Like, there's no overarching plot to speak of in this novel. Which kind of made it difficult to give you guys a synopsis, because I was struggling to figure out what to tell someone who hasn't read the book about what this book is even about. A rich kid, I guess, defies his parents' expectations, joins the mobile infantry, goes through boot camp, fights in battles, gets into hijinks, learns some stuff. Good stuff happens and bad stuff happens, but there really doesn't seem to be much character development. The story doesn't feel like it's driving toward anything. There's really no climax, and the book just kind of ends at the ending of it. There's really no satisfying ending that ties everything together. It kind of just abruptly ends. And I know part of that is Heinlein's philosophy about writing, but if you're looking for a real sense of closure or catharsis or a story told in 3 acts or some kind of traditional narrative arc, you're really not going to get that here. And that was really why I would give this book like a 3.5 out of 5. There's just not enough of an attempt to accomplish what good stories can accomplish, which is to take readers somewhere, to make it feel like the world is opening up for readers. A good novel makes you feel like there was a reason you went on this journey with the characters, even if it's just a slice of life. And I'm not really sure this book totally delivered that. And I kind of feel bad giving this a 3.5 out of 5, because I liked this book, and I really love a lot of what Heinlein says. If you know anything about me, I'm kind of aligned with Heinlein in a lot of his philosophical ideas, but I wanted more of a story, and you get more of that with some of his other novels, but this just didn't have it. But with that out of the way, let's get to our big idea segment. So what I thought I would do here is explore this question of why this book is seen as being so controversial. Why is it still spoken about with this air of both righteous anger and also a sort of desperate pearl clutching? People have said this is a fascist book, that the author's message is controversial, that it's a celebration of militarism. Some people have claimed that the terms and epithets used to describe the aliens are slurs that have been used against people in modern times. Even Paul Verhoeven, the director of the 90s film adaptation, claimed that the world in here is fascist, and that's why he made his adaptation a satire, not only of the novel, but of fascism itself. And so I thought I would examine why I don't think this book should be controversial, why I think people get this wrong, and then I'll get to the big idea that is at the heart of this story. I think part of the controversy has to do with the future setting. The story is set 700 years in the future, and the idea is that these mass social democracies that we live under today have gradually become decadent technocracies. There's been a kind of social entropy that led to the government being the way that it is in this story. The people had become lazy, entitled, self-indulgent. They'd begun to live off of government handouts. It's basically the meme of hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And so the idea here is that you basically have chaos and gangs of violent youths and just generalized mob behavior there, terrorizing the frightened citizens until society collapses and groups of veterans of the war against the Chinese or something like that, I forget what it is exactly, they have to take control and restore order. So from this chaos, what you get in the Terran Federation is essentially a politically realist liberal order, definitely with touches of Sparta, I would say, and what the ancient Greeks called timocracy. The society itself is multicultural, but it's one where full citizenship isn't guaranteed to all members of the population. You actually have to be a military veteran to vote and hold office. So if you're not a military veteran, you do have equal rights, the right to free speech and other civil and natural rights, but you really just don't have all the prerogatives of being a citizen in a participatory democracy. So I think that's probably why people see this book as controversial. I've looked into this, and from what I can tell, the sort of Reddit tier galaxy brain take on this book is that the government Heinlein creates is fascist, which by itself wouldn't be a huge issue. I mean, the Empire in the Warhammer books is fascist. There are plenty of dystopian novels that feature fascistic governments. But I guess the sort of NPR mind virus take on this is that it's bad and problematic because it's not a dystopia. And Heinlein seems to agree with the political status quo in his world because he's not really satirizing it, and in some cases it seems like he's actually supporting it. So let's address that. First of all, when you write a work of speculative fiction and you create a world and or a government, that doesn't automatically mean that you agree with how things are in that world. It doesn't mean that you agree with the political philosophy that animates the government you've created in your book. Secondly, the Terran Federation isn't even slightly fascist, like not even a little bit. It's not even quote unquote nationalistic, not in any meaningful way. And I think one of the only reasons it's still seen that way is that at this point, most young people have only seen the Paul Verhoeven film without having read the book. The Paul Verhoeven film is actually really great, but the problem is that he misinterpreted the original novel, and then he decided to make the film a satire and exaggerate what he saw as fascist elements in the book. And so basically, in the end, he made a film that sort of satirizes fascism in general. It's got the feel of like an Inglourious Bastards or something like that, or a Death of Stalin sort of satire kind of thing. And so young people seem to think that Heinlein wrote a fascist manifesto, and then this brilliant director satirized Heinlein's work, reclaimed it, and made it into his own modern commentary. And again, I love the film. It's totally a cult classic, totally worth watching, but it has very little to do with the society Heinlein actually invented in here. Again, the Terran Federation is a global, actually interplanetary government that serves a multicultural society composed of people of all races and ethnicities. It's quite cosmopolitan, actually. People have robust property rights, the full range of natural rights, protections against discrimination. The society has kind of a military-run government, but what that government overthrew was unlimited democracy, which wasn't working. So Heinlein's idea here is that the governments around the world that we have today are going to become decadent. They're going to turn into decadent, unworkable, almost direct democracies, which collapsed, Heinlein writes, because, quote, people had been led to believe that they could simply vote for whatever they wanted and get it without toil, without sweat, without tears. So direct democracy was tried. Even scientific technocracy was briefly tried. The narrator tells us of the, quote, coup d'etat just before the Treaty of New Delhi, the so-called, quote, revolt of the scientists. Let the intelligent elite run things and you'll have a utopia. It fell flat on its foolish face, of course, because the pursuit of science, despite its social benefits, is itself not a social virtue. Its practitioners can be men so self-centered as to be lacking in social responsibility. So what you have here in the Terran Federation is essentially a form of futuristic Roman republicanism, basically, which is taking the place of systems that led to the breakdown of family and social order and personal responsibility. It's a constitutional republic with limited suffrage that places a strong emphasis on civic virtue. I mean, gosh, you'd really have to be ignorant of even the most basic political science to think that Heinlein meant for the society in his book to be fascist. Like, Heinlein actually begins most of the chapters with quotes from classical liberal thinkers, Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, Winston Churchill, and folks like that. And by the way, in this society, the people with more authority are actually under greater scrutiny and suffer tougher repercussions for their actions than ordinary civilians. A lieutenant, for example, might hang for making a mistake that a private would simply be lashed for or dismissed for. And again, you can disagree with a system that uses corporal or capital punishment. You can disagree with some of the more punitive elements of this society, but that doesn't make it fascist. This is a society that broadly has racial equality. In fact, the main character, Johnny Rico, is actually a Filipino man, and there's equality between the sexes. Anyone can sign up for federal service and become a citizen. So when I say restricted suffrage, I don't mean that by virtue of some surface characteristic, suffrage is restricted. I mean there's simply a barrier to entry. Citizenship is the reward you get for taking on the responsibility of service. And by the way, you can leave federal service at any time. There's no conscription in this world. And I'll add too that it's emphasized many times in the novel how well this system works. Yeah, people complain sometimes, as is their right, but there's really not a heck of a lot of real rebellion. One of the characters says, quote, "Personal freedom for all is greatest in history. Laws are few, taxes are low, living standards are high. Crime is at its lowest ebb." And so, yes, Heinlein does use this book as a platform to attack various ideas that he disagrees with, mainly communism and central planning. The Federation's philosophy is that, quote, "Correct morals arise from knowing what man is, not what do-gooders and well-meaning old Aunt Nellies would like him to be." And so, various characters attack Karl Marx as a, quote, pompous fraud. Marx's labor theory of value, which he actually got from David Ricardo, that is attacked a number of times. He says, quote, "All the work one cares to add will not turn a mud pie into an apple tart." So there he is criticizing the labor theory of value. He criticizes Plato's Republic as, quote, ant-like communism that is weird in the extreme. In fact, actually the bad guys in this book, the arachnids, are communal and have essentially what amounts to a communist hive mind. The bugs, the arachnids, hold their individual members as being essentially worthless. So if anything, you might maybe be able to criticize Heinlein for writing like a Red Scare Cold War novel, but I think even that is a stretch. In other words, Heinlein had the audacity to explore a world where Sparta works, where Sparta is a durable political model to some degree. And of course, in our modern democratic egalitarian age, this puts our Athenian sensibilities on red alert. But I want to say the overall theme of this book is that social responsibility requires being prepared to make individual sacrifices for the common good. Heinlein's argument, and this is a point that's stressed many times throughout the novel, is the recognition that the right to vote is the right to rule. Voting, Heinlein argues, is technically a form of violent force. If you really want to do the logic out, go down that Lockean rabbit hole, and that the right to rule without the responsibility of bearing the consequences of your decisions is a recipe for infantilism writ large. You can dispute whether or not limited franchise is the best way to incentivize civic virtue, but the point is that there is such a thing as better and worse voters, voters who are more or less in touch with the consequences of their actions. A lot of the philosophy in this book actually reminds me very much of the sociologist Rob Henderson's concept of luxury beliefs. Luxury beliefs are beliefs that elites hold because they're completely insulated from the consequences of their actions. So they're beliefs that earn these people social status and clout amongst their similarly affluent peers, but they're beliefs that ordinary people can't afford to have because the consequences would be disastrous for their lives. So luxury beliefs are beliefs that sound great at a cocktail party and they make you sound really compassionate and virtuous, but you yourself don't have to suffer the consequences of those beliefs being enacted as policy. Defund the police was a really good example of this, right? It was amazing to watch wealthy people in gated neighborhoods and politicians with a private security detail arguing for defund the police because, of course, defunding the police wouldn't really affect their lives given where they live, their zip code, their level of wealth. I can't tell you the number of upper middle class and wealthy white women on Facebook arguing for this perspective on behalf of the poor and on behalf of black people in the summer of 2020. And then, of course, no one was surprised to find that black people, many of whom have to live with the horrifying reality of decreased police funding, were totally against this. 81% of black people wanted police budgets to be kept the same and in many cases increased. And this poll was done in either July or August of 2020, I forget. And so this is what's going on in Starship Troopers. If you want to vote for more war, you have to have served. You have to have seen what military life is like, what war is like. You have to have battled the arachnids, or at the very least, sacrificed in some way for your country. You have to have some skin in the game. You have to have lived a life that is not disconnected from the consequences of the policies you've advocated for. And related to that, another concept Heinlein focuses on is this, and I'll end with this today. Perhaps the most, I would say, salient philosophical theme in this book is that any society that decouples rights and responsibilities is, unwittingly or not, enabling irresponsible power. Any natural rights theory can tell you this, that every right comes with a corresponding duty. If I have a right to my own life, you have a duty not to kill me, right? If I have a right to free speech, you have a duty to refrain from interfering with my speech. And Heinlein seems to have been aware of this. And this is a great, beautiful quote here from chapter 8. And I will end with this. The basis of all morality is duty. Nobody preached duty to these kids in a way that they could understand. That is, with a spanking. But the society they were in told them endlessly about their rights. The results should have been predictable, since a human being has no natural rights of any nature. Mr. Dubois paused and somebody took the bait. Sir, how about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Ah, yes, the unalienable rights. Each year someone quotes that magnificent poetry. Life? What right to life has a man who's drowning in the Pacific? The ocean will not hearken to his cries. What right to life has a man who must die to save his children? If he chooses to save his own life, does he do so as a matter of right? If two men are starving and cannibalism is the only alternative to death, which man's right is unalienable? And is it right? As liberty, the heroes who signed the great document pledged to themselves to buy liberty with their lives. Liberty is never unalienable. It must be redeemed regularly with the blood of patriots, or it always vanishes. Of all the so-called natural human rights that have ever been invented, liberty is the least likely to be cheap and is never free of cost. The third right, the pursuit of happiness, it is indeed unalienable, but it is not a right. It is simply a universal condition which tyrants cannot take away, nor patriots restore. Cast me into a dungeon, burn me at the stake, crown me king of kings. I can pursue happiness as long as my brain lives. But neither gods nor saints nor wise men nor subtle drugs can ensure that I will catch it. I told you that juvenile delinquent is a contradiction in terms. Delinquent means failing in duty, but duty is an adult virtue. Indeed, a juvenile becomes an adult when and only when he acquires a knowledge of duty and embraces it as dearer than the self-love he was born with. All right, folks, so I'm going to end with that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Catch up with us on Facebook, Goodreads, Instagram, and until next time, happy reading.